Good afternoon, everybody. My name is State Representative Mark Lombardo, and it is my honor to welcome you all here today. And it is our honor to welcome our Governor, Charlie Baker. This is a historic day for our community, a day in which we make official something that we have already known, that we are America's Yankee Doodle town. This being the home of Thomas Ditson, I was very proud to sponsor this legislation. And I'd like to recognize Mike Rosa and his mother Carol Rosa, who sponsored the warrant article at town meeting that began the process through town meeting and sent it to the legislature to begin the legislative process. So Mike and Carol, thank you very much. I'd like to start today's ceremony with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to ask the Police Honor Guard to present the colors. And I'd like to ask the Ditson Elementary School students, led by Kathy Burns and Victoria Hayden, to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and have a good day.
Let's hear it for our Ditson students. And to sing the national anthem, I'd like to introduce Jacob Carlson. He is a senior at Billerica Memorial High School. He is not only a terrific student and a talented singer, but he is also captain of the football team. Jacob? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we've hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we've watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? I'd like to recognize our Superintendent of Schools, Tim Pavova. Our Chief of Police, Dan Rosa, who's back there. I'd like to welcome Sheriff Peter Katusian again to Billerica. He's always here, and he's just marching the parade last week, so welcome back. Thank you. We also have Boy Scout Troop 11 who's here joining us today, so thank you, Troop. I'd also like to thank Curtis Knight and Anna for volunteering today with the audio and music services, so thank you. And I want to take a moment to recognize my colleague, Senator Ken Donnelly. He sends his regrets that he couldn't be here today. Many of you may know Senator Donnelly dealt with a brain tumor several months ago. He is continuing with his treatments and therefore wasn't able to make it. But I'd like to ask you all to keep him in your thoughts and prayers and wishing him a speedy recovery. With us today, we also have the Board of Selectmen. I'd like to recognize John Piscatelli, Selectman Kim Conway, Selectman Dan Burns, Selectman George Similaris, and Chairman Andrew Delorier. And at this time, I'd like to invite the Chairman to come up and say a few words. Let's hear it for Selectman Andrew Delorier.
There has never been more inappropriate music for my introduction.
On behalf of the entire town of Billerica, I'm here to confer greetings on all our assembled dignitaries. And on behalf of all public officials over 6'2", I'd like to welcome my colleagues, the governor and the sheriff. It's good to be amongst normal-heighted people. Today, we celebrate a song that reminds us that even in colonial times, it was unwise to mess with people from Pinehurst. We celebrate a small act by a small person that had a great impact. Traditionally, when we study American history, we concentrate on great battles, great movements, and enormous personalities. Mr. Ditson was a simple farmer. His major accomplishment, essentially, was enduring. Enduring being treated poorly by the authorities just because they could get away with it. They could do so because they perceived Mr. Ditson as having less rights because of who he was. Mr. Ditson didn't win that day. Although several months later he engaged in the struggle for freedom in the early days of the revolution that we did win. But before that, he inspired his neighbors by not giving in to tar or verse, a small personal act that had a large impact around him. Americans' true advancement is marked by many small acts rather than large ones. Small act of choosing to vote regardless of you're a man or a woman. The small act of choosing to sit wherever you want on the bus. The small act of choosing to marry whoever you want to marry. Each day, the people of Billerica engage in small acts that change our world, including the students at the school named for Mr. Ditson, whose pledge begins with the words, "I promise to be caring, fair, and kind to everyone." Let us celebrate this song and celebrate the small acts of Mr. Ditson and everyone around us. Thank you, everyone here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my honor to Governor Charlie Baker to Billerica. Governor Baker has been governor since 2014. From his first days in office, Governor Baker recognized the great work that cities and towns do throughout Massachusetts and has made it a priority to increase local aid and education funding for our communities. And at the cornerstone of his administration, Governor Baker led the charge, working with the legislature to pass landmark legislation to take on the opioid epidemic facing the Commonwealth and here at home in the Merrimack Valley. His leadership has led to historic investments towards substance abuse recovery. He has also supported funding, which I appreciate, for the Yankee Doodle bike path. I'm sure we all appreciate that. It is my honor to introduce a great leader, the Governor of the Commonwealth, and my friend, the Honorable Charlie Baker.
So my first comment would be the musical accompaniment continues its streak of inappropriate selections. Well, first of all, let me thank you all for coming out today. I especially want to thank Representative Lombardo for working hard with Senator Donnelly to get this legislation passed so that we could sign it and basically deliver something everybody else up here already knew, which is that Billerica is in fact Yankee Doodle Town. And now, the really interesting part about this is I'm one of those somewhat uninformed citizens of the Commonwealth who always thought that Yankee Doodle was a happy song. And it was only when this legislation started to move that I actually got a dose of what this song is really all about. And for those kids who are here from Thomas Ditson School, I guess I would just start by saying that Thomas Ditson, he's a special guy. Okay, you talk about somebody who got tarred and feathered and basically dragged through the streets of the community by the British soldiers, basically as an example of how the occupying force would choose to handle those who didn't bend to their demands. And he chose not to bend. And I got to tell you, when I read the part about within months after that, he picked up a gun and was engaged in the fight against the British. All I could think was, you tar and feather me, it's going to be a hell of a lot longer than that before I'm up and about and into the mix. So I think it's important that the first thing we do today is we acknowledge that Thomas Ditson, he came to play, and he brought the very best of what the people of that time and the people of this country have always been all about, which is a willingness to fight for their freedom and a willingness to stand up to tyranny and a willingness to chase the big dream that's always been part of the American heritage, which is freedom. And good for him, and good for Billerica, and God bless you all for stepping up and making sure that we recognize and appreciate the historical significance of what it means to be Yankee Doodle Town here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Bravo to Billerica on that one. And I also want to say that Representative Lombardo talked a little bit about the fact that the Lieutenant Governor and I, as part of our administration, have been deeply committed to supporting cities and towns. Well, that's not an accident, because I'm a former member of my Board of Selectmen in Swampscott, and the Lieutenant Governor is a former member of her Board of Selectmen in Shrewsbury. One of the things you learn when you spend time serving in local government, and I'm sure all the folks here who have served in local government, either in an elected office or an official capacity, or as a volunteer, will all tell you the same thing, which is the Commonwealth of Mass at the state level, up there on Beacon Hill, we sometimes have trouble figuring out what the right thing to do is on behalf of the Commonwealth cities and towns. So one of the things Karen and I have tried desperately to bring to our work on Beacon Hill is a sensibility and an appreciation about the role of local government in building strong communities around the Commonwealth. Massachusetts, the way people feel about the Commonwealth of Mass is a function of how they feel about how things are going in their city or town. And if you want to have a great state, the way you have a great state is by having 351 great cities and towns from one end of Massachusetts to the other. And that's why we work so hard to establish our Compact program, which is a voluntary best practices program where we provide technical assistance to cities and towns who want to work on particular elements of their service delivery. 250 communities on a voluntary basis have signed up with us to work on one or another of these opportunities, and it's why we work so hard to pass the municipal modernization legislation. Now, I'll be the first to admit the municipal modernization isn't exactly going to grab anybody who's sitting in front of me here, okay? But what you all need to know is it's been 50 years since the state of Massachusetts updated the rules and regulations by which the cities and towns of Massachusetts operate. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. Let's suppose you run a business and somebody said you had to operate that business under the rules and standards that existed 50 years ago. So that means no internet, no online capability, snail mail for everything, special kinds of reports that no longer have any real meaning, but you have to keep generating over and over again, and business processes that literally date back to the 50s and 60s and 70s. Or let's suppose you had to run your house without any modern appliances. May have brought you into sort of the same zone that Thomas Ditson and the folks in his day lived in. But in terms of making sure that you could run and operate the most efficient and effective local government you possibly could, yet. So that legislation, 250 pages, 125 sections, the Mass Municipal Association called it the single biggest advance in state-local government relations in the last 50 years. And Mark, like many other local officials who serve up on Beacon Hill, who know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of all that goo that comes from state government, was one of the people who led the charge on fixing that. And I'll tell you something, you will have a far more effective community here in Billerica and a far more effective local government because of the work that was done to get that legislation passed. And I think you should give Mark and everybody else who was involved in getting that done a round of applause. And the final thing I just want to say is, I'm a big history buff. I'm a big believer that history is an important part of who we are and what we're all about. And for all of those of you kids who are sitting up here today, this isn't just a chance to hang out on a beautiful day and maybe have spent a little time at school today talking about something else other than what you should have been talking about. This is a great opportunity for you to learn that your community and the people who are part of the town of Billerica played a significant part in delivering on the greatest startup of all time, which is the United States of America. Thank you all very much.
At this time, I'd like to welcome the Billerica Colonial Minutemen, who will offer a salute.